Now, having said that, I'm willing to be educated. I'm educable, as they say, of things as certain groups of Catholic voters, subgroups, whether it's Irish Catholics, whether it's, you could even argue, I have never seen data on this, maybe it exists, that people who come from Catholic educational systems have similar vote behavior. I haven't seen that, but at least there is there's an internal logic there about people who've been educated a certain way. And I don't want to, I'm going to just make one or two more points and I'm going to stop. What seems to me to be happening, not just to Catholics, but to all voters, is, I think the evidence is clear, there is a move to political independence. Among some voters, a move toward Republicans, that's true, but in general and among many groups, toward political independence, as we have a society where families seem to pass fewer values along. It wouldn't be surprising if one of the values they didn't pass along as much as they used to was partisanship. And as people move to the suburbs, and as people intermarry, and as people engage in a variety of activities, I think what we see is Catholic voters acting as suburban voters, as upscale voters, as people who join health clubs. I don't know. For all I know, there's a strong correlation between people who join health clubs and vote behavior. It might even be stronger than religiosity. I don't know. Now, I'm not suggesting that religion is irrelevant or that Catholic membership, is that a way of talking about? Catholic membership is irrelevant. I think that obviously partisanship, and there is some worldview passed along. But I am waiting now for the rest of the panel for someone to correct me, to demonstrate that there is a Catholic vote. And until I see that, I guess I'm going to hold on to the belief that voters are becoming more independent, that voters are becoming, that Catholic voters are being affected by other variables rather than simply religiosity, that religion is not irrelevant. It was at one time extremely important, not for itself merely, but because it was connected to other variables, working class status, for example, immigrant status, and that as some of those peel away, I think we're going to see religiosity as a variable peel away among many groups. I think I'll leave it at that.
Thanks very much. Thanks very much, Stuart. Let's turn next to Kate O'Beirne, who is one of the people who drew attention, I think, to the question of the significance of the Catholic vote at a time long before it became part of the contemporary flurry of activity, and was reflected on it, studied it, and looked at it in a little bit more depth, I think, than most of those who have commented on it today. From National Review and formerly of the Heritage Foundation.
Thank you, David. I'm also reminded, and as seen on Capital Gang Saturday evenings on CNN with Marshall and Robert Novak, who we missed today. I wrote an article last spring for National Review. Is this on? Is there any trouble hearing? I wrote an article last spring for National Review on the Catholic vote, owing to the fact that for the first time in history, in November 1994, Catholics voted for Republicans at the congressional level. And it was such a startling development, I felt at the time that it was worth more exploration. Now, since then, as David properly explained, and Stuart made reference to, CNN has done a special, Business Week this week has a piece on the Catholic vote, Time Magazine has done it. So the mainstream media in this election year is clearly going to be focusing on this elusive Catholic vote. In the Hill newspaper, they did an article on the Catholic vote a couple of weeks ago, and they repeated something that I think, an old story that most people in this audience would identify with. Years ago up in Boston, a mini scandal was created when two Irish Catholics were chatting with each other right after Election Day, and one said to the other, "You know, Patty Quinn on Tuesday voted Republican." And the second fellow says, "That's a dirty, rotten lie. I saw him in church on Sunday." We Irish Catholics understand. Right. The heresy of Irish Catholics moving towards the Republican Party. But I disagree with Stuart because it is clearly happening. The Catholic vote is not a block. I don't disagree there. It's certainly not a block like the black vote is, with a racial consciousness that leads blacks to vote overwhelmingly for Democrats. It's not a bloc like it has been historically. In previous times, the Catholic vote, I think, clearly was a bloc. No big mystery there. Look at Al Smith's Democratic Party and the obnoxious Republican response to the Al Smith candidacy. Ethnic Catholics felt unwelcome and clearly felt conscious of their religion, conscious of being ethnics, and consciously welcome in the Democratic Party and unwelcome in the Republican Party. It's no longer a bloc in that sense, but I think the evidence is overwhelming that religion informs Catholics' cultural views and that their religious beliefs and sensibilities are clearly informing votes in recent years. And the potential is there owing to that for a major realignment. Let me run through some of the numbers for you. There are, of course, 60 million Catholics, making up about 25% of the population. By some estimate, though, it's about a third of the national vote, owing to Catholics' propensities to vote in higher numbers than others. There are, of course, millions of Catholic Republicans, but millions more are swing voters. There's no firm attachment, and there are millions of Catholic Democrats, but there is no firm attachment on the part of millions of Catholics. They are a higher proportion, as Stu rightly reminded us, in key states. In Pennsylvania, they're about 30% of the population, but 39% of the voting population. In New Jersey, 42% of the population, but fully 50% of the voting population. They're in high numbers, of course, in Ohio and Michigan. They have, as we know, historic affiliation with the Democratic Party for some of the reasons I mentioned. Ethnics were, of course, welcome. It was Al Smith's party. They have been, as a bloc, a key part of the New Deal coalition, ethnic Catholics. However, they had been known on the presidential level to vote Republican, but only on the presidential level. They supported Eisenhower. They were part of Nixon's New Majority coalition in 1972. They went with Reagan in 1980 and even more enthusiastically in 84 when Reagan got 56% of the Catholic vote. And they stuck with Bush in 1988. They abandoned the Republicans in 1992. Now, they didn't go home to the Democrats, which I think is also a warning for the Democrats. They voted, their vote was essentially invisible, as Stu reminded us, because they vote essentially like the national vote did. They roughly voted for Clinton, Bush, and Perot in the same percentages as the national vote. It is startling to recognize them voting for Perot, 19% of Catholics voting for Perot. Historically, they have a lower tendency to vote for third-party candidates than others. I think it shows a disaffection with the Democrats and a disaffection with Republicans, and it was far easier to go with an independent than move to the Republican column. So as I said, both parties should note that the startling development that these traditional party voters went with the third party in '92. Despite these defections at the presidential level, Catholics were always reliable Democratic voters at the congressional level. They no sooner voted for an Eisenhower, Nixon, or a Reagan, they turned around and returned their local Democratic congressman to office. In fact, between 1976 and 1992, House Democrats received over 60% of the Catholic vote, reliably. That's what made 1994 so startling. Even when President Clinton got about 43% of the Catholic vote, he got the plurality of the vote in '92, Catholics turned around and gave 57% of their vote to House Democrats, as had been the tradition. Within 2 years, there was a full 10-point drop-off in Catholic support for House Democrats. 52% of Catholics voted for House Republicans. You won't be surprised to learn that the percentages were particularly high among younger Catholics. 53% of Catholics between the ages of 18 and 29 voted Republican. 59% of Catholics between the ages of 31 and 40. This doesn't surprise us. Younger Catholics do not have the affinity with the Democratic Party that their grandparents might have. They find it much more comfortable to vote Republican than their ancestors.